Happy President's Day to the best president of my lifetime, maybe ever. And coming up on the show today, sports. Our soon-to-be 51st state of Canada thought it'd be cute to boo during the national anthem again, and then in short order, their team got their butts handed to them again, a thing of beauty. And the people's president made a special visit to the Daytona 500, and let's just say Donald Trump got a warmer welcome than Brandon. Plus, CNN's Kaitlin Collins pulled a Kamala and tweeted out a legal defense fund link for Luigi Mangione, and then took it back. Also, Tom Hanks is a classless jerk. More on that later. And last but not least, another important step in rectifying the COVID era of stupidity has been made, and I have some final thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. It all starts now. I don't usually start the show with sports, but in this case, I'll make an exception. Canadian hockey fans thought they'd be cutesy, bold, and brave, and once again boo during the Star-Spangled Banner ahead of Saturday night's face-off against Team USA. And let's just say, that didn't go too well for them. Not only did several fights break out in about the first 10 seconds, but Team USA owned them in their own stadium. They obviously do not want to be our 51st state, but should perhaps reconsider, given we beat them at everything, and really the only thing that country has to offer is syrup. But wait, there's more sports to get to. President Trump is a man of the people and made another big sports appearance over the weekend at the Daytona 500. The people love him, and it's obvious. You know, the left is trying the same old tired tactic of making him out to be some boogeyman, and it's not working. Donald Trump showing up to these big events like Daytona or the Super Bowl or UFC demonstrates he's a leader for all Americans, and honestly, he's a badass who can completely and authentically connect with any group of people. It's also a stark contrast to the Democrats who are foaming at the mouth and spewing swear words left and right out of desperation and, quite frankly, panic. What a time to be alive. Kamala could never be this cool, by the way. And the only time Joe Biden riled up a sports crowd was when they were calling him Brandon and some other things. Joining me now to go over it all is the Ben Domenech Podcast host and Fox News contributor, our friend Ben Domenech. All right, Ben, I got to let's start with Canada. Okay, the Canadians, they're very upset. They don't want to be our 51st state. They feel disrespected. They're not going to travel to the U.S. anymore and bring their tourism dollars. They're going to go somewhere else instead. I don't know, Ben. I, quite frankly, don't care if the Canadians don't come to Nashville to have a bachelorette weekend. It doesn't really impact me in the slightest. But I'm wondering if you think these threats and this outcry from Canadian officials and leaders, do you think it moves the needle at all with President Trump?
No, it doesn't, Tommy. But actually, I have to say, I kind of welcome this as a development in sports. I like the fact that we're getting back to, a point where we just don't like each other. And, that's the best part, frankly, about the Olympics when Americans succeed is shoving it in people's faces all around the world. But look, I think that this is in some ways healthy, especially given that the natural inclination of many Canadians online was to apologize for the boos and say, oh, sorry, and that kind of thing. I do disagree with you. I do think that Canada's best export is actually comedians, but they all come down from Canada to America in order to make it big here, and that's something that I hope they continue to do. Look, bringing the lumber and going after them on their home court and booing our national anthem there, I think it riled up the Americans, and it put them in the mood to bring the lumber. And I can't get enough of it. I love it, and I hope that we boo them when it comes to if we end up facing off against them again on Thursday.
Yeah, I just hope that we destroy them, to your point. And the Canadians, I know that Canadians are typically, nice people, but I also know during the COVID era, there were many Canadians who fled to the United States because they didn't like the draconian measures. And I will say another thing about Canada, to their credit. There are some conservative-minded folks in Canada. We know the Freedom Truckers, they stood up against tyranny, so I'll give them credit. They would probably be better off being our 51st state. Let's just be honest. But,
Yes.
Whatever. We'll let President Trump work that one out. Let's talk about Daytona, though. I thought that was another great, fantastic moment. And I'm not surprised that a racing crowd would love to see President Trump. I think that's kind of expected. But for me, I just think it's so interesting that the left hasn't caught up with culture. yet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that
they want him to be like this demon, this villain, and maybe he was in 2017, but he's not anymore. People love him.
This is the thing. They've lost so much ground in terms of the way that Donald Trump has become, oh gosh, scared. We've normalized him. No, actually, the American people have normalized Donald Trump. They know who he is. They've reelected him overwhelmingly. And the truth is that he can, as you said in your opening, he can go to all these different things. He can be a president for all people. He can go to California. He can go to North Carolina. He can go to Daytona. And the truth is, he is no longer in the position that the left wants to keep him in from back in 2017, when they used the shock of his victory to basically scare everyone to believing for a certain amount of time that he was this horrible authoritarian person. Instead, people have seen the evidence. They've seen it for themselves. And that's why his agenda is enormously popular, why he's welcomed in situations like this, and why Democrats are, frankly, running around with their hair on fire because they can't figure out how to deal with him, how to respond to him. And they still have their hard left progressive flank that doesn't even want to have a conversation with him, that actively goes out every day and calls him Hitler. And that's the type of situation that for their coalition, they're never going to be able to become a majority coalition again unless they can actually get back to a point of saying, no, he's the president for the next 4 years, and we're going to have to work with him if we want to get anything done and if we want to get back to a point where we can be a competitive party.
They haven't caught up. They're still living in, I think, not even 2017. I think they're living in 2020. They had their heyday in 2020. People were wearing masks, staying at home. People were looting for George Floyd. I mean, it really was their era. Like 2020 was their year. They elected a dementia-ridden president and a vice president who I think's political career is over. But that was their year, and it's over now. And so here we are. I also want to talk to you about something that I think is interesting, just from kind of zooming out and looking at this thing. And it's been really on my mind lately. We were so close to having Kamala be our president, right?
Oh
and
God.
I'm thinking like back to pre-election, a lot of us were anticipating if Kamala were to win, they're going to give amnesty to illegals. They're going to get illegal immigrants voting. Republicans might never be able to win an election again if those are the circumstances. We came that close. And now, to your point, Ben, it feels like we're never going to lose again, at least with this current Democrat Party. I don't want to be cocky because that's where we fail. Like never underestimate a Republican Party's ability to shoot itself in the foot. But at least as we stand here about a month into this administration and with the way Democrats are acting, we were so close to never winning again. And now I don't know when the next time is that we're going to lose if we keep up at this pace. I don't want to be cocky, but what's your assessment?
Well, look, one of the great Canadian exports, the show Shoresy, which is a hockey show. There's a line from one of the main characters in it about their team when they're going through a rough spat. We'll never lose again. We will never lose again. And unfortunately, I have to say, I've been sending that meme around to my friends over the past couple of weeks because it does kind of feel that way because of how crazy they've gone. Once again, they're doubling down on the same kind of things that we saw before. And you're right to say that they hit their apex during the summer of love and George Floyd and everything around that in terms of forcing us and mandating us. People never want to go back to that. They saw what that was like and they never want to go back to it. And for Democrats, I think you look around the media landscape, there's so few of them who are actually acting like sane people these days, who are trying to figure out, we've got to have a path forward. Who do we want to be the next face of this party who's not going to be some crazy, millennial politician who's only online, or someone who's so old and decrepit that, hey, Nancy Pelosi's running again. She's still going to be, hanging around in terms of leading the party, at least titularly. And this is the thing that I think is going to be a real problem for them. The very same people who they should be listening to have been completely sidelined thanks to the elevation of people like Kamala Harris. And instead of getting back to being something that can appeal to the center of the country, they're stuck with, as you call her, the Aristotle of American politics, just waxing eloquent under a certain amount of what looks like influence on Broadway. And that's the kind of thing that I think is never going to bring people back into their coalition. And they really have, I think, doubled down on the crazy. Unless they can pull themselves out of it, there is going to be, I think, a situation here that they may have to get even worse before things can make a comeback. Like they lose even more before they're able to find their way out of the wilderness.
Well, the people that they're elevating are people like Jasmine Crockett. And I don't think that there's anybody more annoying than Jasmine Crockett. Like, I thought AOC was bad. Jasmine Crockett is worse. And she tries to play this part like an Atlanta housewife. And I love the housewives, and it annoys me. I know your wife loves the housewives. It still annoys me. I want to watch it on Bravo. I don't want to watch it on C-SPAN.
Exactly.
But, there are members of the media, too, that I don't think will ever find their relevance. And this is obviously a clip that's been going viral. We know democracy was at stake. Right now, we're in a constitutional crisis. But when in doubt, when they have nothing else to go on, they start referring to things as Nazi, Hitler-like, and now free speech is in that category. This is a really bizarre stretch, even for mainstream media. But let's play the viral clip. And then Secretary of State Rubio, who you mentioned has had a great glow up, his response as well. Let's take a look at this viral clip.
He was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. The context of that was changing the tone of it. And you know that the censorship was specifically about the right.
No, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was also no opposition in Nazi Germany. They were a sole and only party that governed that country. So that's not an accurate reflection of history.
So is she stupid, or is she just really trying to find an angle and she can't find it?
Look, I know Margaret Brennan. I used to be on CBS. I was there for a couple of years, and I got to tell you, this is just completely consistent with the way that I think that she views the world, which is very, very dumb. And unfortunately, I think Marco Rubio is being nice to her in that clip because I think he could have gone after her even harder. Talk about a Sunday for CBS News between that and the 60 Minutes, pushing of a pro-German censorship agenda in terms of the regime that they're talking about there. It's ones that can go and show up at people's houses and arrest you over memes and comments and insults that you do to others online. It's truly an anti-free speech stance that they've taken, and one that the vice president was right to criticize. He went to Munich and gave a speech there that is more memorable and more important, I think, than literally anything that Kamala Harris did in her 4 years as vice president. And the reaction from Europe is only proving that he was right to criticize them for this, that they're abandoning their Western values and that they're using fear-mongering and censorship to shut down speech that they don't like. And sometimes, even in the case of Britain, it's not even speech, it's quiet prayer in your house. And that's the kind of thing that I think he deserved to be called out. He was right to call it out. And I think we're only going to see more of this lean into, well, we can't beat them at the ballot box, so instead we're going to justify censoring opinions we don't like, going after these people we don't like online, and use the weapon of censorship, disinformation, and the like. And that's one of the reasons why this defunding of U.S. aid is so important. Because so much of the funding that goes to these NGOs and to these entities around the world has been funding that goes through that source. And that's something that we should never fund as U.S. taxpayers. It only increased under Joe Biden. We've got to put a stop to it.
Let's have that discussion, too, because this is ongoing. I mean, this has been the story for the last 4 weeks, and it's going to continue with Doge and Elon Musk and what they're doing, the audits. We know it's going to be tied up in the courts, at least for a time being. I think that's a delayed tactic. And, President Trump said maybe they want to just delay it as long as they can so they can try to hide all the nefarious things that they were doing, like clean the books real quick before they get in there and take a look at things. But I mentioned on Twitter over the weekend, I still call it Twitter. I'm a millennial. Yeah. I'm just going to keep calling it that. But I mentioned the hills that Democrats are dying on, to me, is so bizarre, even for them. I mean, the fact that they're going to say that cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, that's really where they want to go with this. And they want to spin this at like, oh my gosh, cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, that's a constitutional crisis. That's bizarre to me, even for them. But as we uncover more and more, I think the panic is really going to set in for those that maybe have been doing some things that they don't want people to know about. How close do you think we are to that? And do you think anyone's going to go to jail over it?
Well, on that last point, I don't know, because I think we're only beginning to see some of the most nefarious aspects of this. And I think that there is actually going to be some real consequences for some of these people who may have been, frankly, allied with outside entities that were benefiting from the kind of fraud that we saw going on. But here's what I want to put in perspective from to your original point about Democrats freaking out and dying on the wrong hill. Cutting foreign aid is always going to be popular with the American people. It's the easiest thing to cut, and that's for a reason, because it's rife with waste, fraud, and abuse, and it also ends up doing a lot of things that Americans just don't believe we ought to be doing. Secondly, people are falsely accusing this administration of going after and targeting individuals in some kind of scaremongering way because of their ideology. But most bureaucrats, frankly, are left of center. And the people who are getting fired for justifiable reasons, frankly, that we don't need them to be doing those jobs. There's so many redundancies within the federal government that, people who have been hired on a probationary basis can be fired on this. And I think the president will win at the courts, on that ground. But for instance, again, I hate to talk about CBS even more, but on 60 Minutes, they highlight two people who they put forward as being USAID employees. They worked for an outside consultant. And one of the ones that they put forward, she was writing speeches for Samantha Power, who obviously, resigned when the new administration came in, is going to be, replaced if her job still exists. And why would you want Samantha Power's speechwriter hanging around writing for someone who's meant to have a completely different agenda? That's not about some targeting over ideology. That's the basic function of a government when administrations change. And that's something that I think Democrats, because they love bureaucracy, they love government spending, they love all these programs, they think everyone else must love it too. But the American people know that bureaucracy is something that's decrepit, it's old, it's slow, and it certainly could use a real kick in the pants. And that's what Doge is doing to it.
Yeah. And again, forgive me, when they have these people on that are crying about losing their jobs, I don't know many Americans that look at that with any sympathy, especially when it was not long ago, Ben, as you and I well know, that people's businesses were being forcibly closed, that people were being fired for not getting a COVID vaccine. And now they want to bring on this pity party like we lost our jobs because our jobs were needless. And now what are we going to do? And you know what? Some of us have to go into the office now. Like, oh, the horror.
5 days a week. Oh my gosh. Who could possibly do that, Tomi?
The work-life balance is off. It's so annoying to me. And it's like, that's what they think, though, is going to garner sympathy. And they're just way off target. I mean, they're not even in the ballpark of the target. Here's another thing that I just have to get to because I think it's so hilarious. We got a glimpse on Friday on the outer oval of Trump's mugshot and that New York Post cover. I mean, talk about a troll. I think that's the greatest. It's something he's proud of. He's always been proud of it. He's always been proud of that mugshot. But the fact that that's there, I mean, to me, that's a not so subtle reminder of if you're going to take a shot at the king, you best not miss. And they missed. And now they have to look at it. I think it's fantastic.
So what I would like to point out to you, just for people who haven't been in the Oval, and I can tell you just a little bit about the geography of that. First off, that means that they're different entrances, obviously, to the Oval. That's the entrance that most world dignitaries will use to enter the Oval. The other one that they have is more for larger groups. So for instance, we happened to be in the Oval. We were invited by President Trump to be there when our friend Tulsi Gabbard was sworn in. And I actually didn't go through that entrance because that's like the more important one. And we are the ones who come through the less important entrance. And that to me is absolutely hilarious. So every important person's going to have to walk by it. And it's also the entrance that's right by where all the press tends to huddle up to ask him questions. So they all get to see it on a daily basis. And it is just perfect. I love it. I think it's hilarious. And I'm glad that he did it. And I just regret the fact that because I came in through the other way, I didn't get to see it in person. I just didn't see it. So maybe next time.
Oh, I mean, I think you should make it bigger even.
Yeah,
I love it. I mean, I think there's a lot of
make it a
iconic
poster.
photos he could be hanging up in there. And I hope that I hope that they stay. You brought up other members of the media. The media, they're going crazy right now. I don't know what's happening. It's like wilding out. Kaitlin Collins, who a lot of people forget, used to work at the Daily Caller, by the way, which is so bizarre because a lot of people
encourage people to look up the titles of some of her best performing pieces.
I know. Isn't it crazy? I mean, she's had a complete flip. Not that people don't. We know there are a lot of people that change their minds, but it's really bizarre to see the transformation. Now, over the weekend, she tweeted out a legal defense fund for Luigi Mangione, the one who's accused of killing the United Healthcare CEO in cold blood. And she put out the website, and then she quickly said, hey, I'm just doing this journalistically. I'm just pointing out that there is a legal defense fund. But why'd you put the URL, though? Like, the excuse doesn't make any sense for me. And I know that this seems like so long ago when the United Healthcare CEO was gunned down and people were celebrating it. But the fact that she's resurrecting the story so she can tweet out a legal defense fund, that's also bizarre to me. The actions of these media members are bizarre to me.
Yeah, well, your point is completely accurate, which is that she could easily have posted he's started a legal defense fund without linking it. Okay, because the instant that you link it, you're obviously promoting it. You're promoting it to be shared. You're doing it from your platform, just as we saw, Kamala Harris do and other politicians do back during the Summer of Love. And that's something that, she should have been way more cognizant of. And look, you mentioned before about the problem of these different characters who act more like Real Housewives. Maybe Andy Cohen should be hosting that show instead, because I feel like he has a better judge of things that going on in the world, and maybe a better judge of history than Margaret Brennan. Why don't we try some new blood in some of these roles? Because we have people who've gone so crazy and have leaned so far to the left that when they do things like this, they don't even think about the ramifications of it, and then they end up being surprised when there's a backlash because they're no longer in control of the narrative. Everything has shifted. The vibes have shifted. And this is not a situation where they can get away with this stuff without being called out on it anymore.
I particularly loved it when President Trump told her to be quiet last week because he didn't ask her to speak yet, which I thought was just a great moment, and it really shut her up. It was wonderful. I want to get into a little bit of border stuff before we go to Tom Hanks, because the numbers today are really stunning. Tom Homan, of course, our borders are tweeting out that the apprehensions and the people crossing the border, I mean, it's not enough to fill a couple of buses. And I think it's crazy because we were told over and over again by the Biden administration and over again, that was Kamala's only talking point on the border, is that there was a bipartisan border bill that would have solved the crisis. And that's why it couldn't be solved. Well, to my knowledge, Ben, we don't have a bipartisan border bill, but we're having low apprehensions. People are not crossing the border. People are self-deporting, and we're rounding up the criminal aliens and we're shipping them to Gitmo or back to their country of origin. It feels like it can be done without a bipartisan border bill. And I know that you are just shocked as I am.
The thing that infuriated me so much about that bill and the conversation around it is that bill wouldn't even have solved the problem at all. Even though it was negotiated, in a bipartisan manner, I just thought there were so many problems with it. And for her to use that as her crutch during the entire time that she was running for president was absolutely foolish, especially because, as you and I both know, this is a policy choice that the administration was making. They chose to have the kind of border that we had for multiple years. And by the way, the only leg that Democrats have to stand on now is they're saying things like, oh, look, Trump isn't catching enough of them. There aren't enough apprehensions. Well, no duh, because there aren't people coming across anymore. You don't have that level of activity and chaos. And he's made clear there are going to be consequences for people who are here as well. So, look, I think that the shift on border policy just proves the lie that Democrats were running with on trying to blame Republicans for there being a border issue. These were always decisions that they could have made. And quite honestly, I think if they had made them from day one, if they had fired Mayorkas, if they had actually made some differences in policy changes earlier on, they might not have been in the position that they ended up in electorally. But people were so fed up with it that they wanted a change. They demanded it, and they got it.
I also think, just from a purely realistic, logical, and strategic standpoint, if you are a wannabe illegal alien, and you know that if you pay a criminal organization, let's just say it's $10,000, sometimes it's more, to smuggle you across the border, and you get here and you've already spent that $10K or more that you had to scrape up, you get here, and then you're going to be deported, you're not going to come because you're wasting your money. And also, if you're going to come here and commit more crimes and you know that your ass is going to be sent to Gitmo, oh, boy, you're really not coming. And it's just so simple. This was never rocket science. We do have a rocket scientist who is advising the president, but it doesn't take that to understand when you take the carrot away, people are going to stop coming. It's quite obvious to me, apparently not to them, or maybe it was just all part of the plan. They really overplayed their hand. They thought they were going to win the election. They thought they were going to give all these people amnesty and voting rights, and whoopsies, it didn't turn out that way. Yeah. I want to go on to Tom Hanks now, because as much, Ben, as I don't like to get riled up when Hollywood celebrities poke fun or just blatantly insult conservatives or Trump supporters, this really did piss me off, and we have the still images. You know, not only is it completely tone deaf, and I want to get your take, but I want to give you mine. It's one thing if Tom Hanks wants to go out there and he wants to insult Donald Trump or Elon Musk, but they don't actually choose to do that. They choose to insult and make fun of Americans who support Donald Trump. He's wearing like an America shirt on there. I think it had like an American flag and maybe an eagle, a denim jacket, the red hat. He is actively just insulting average, everyday Americans who voted for Donald Trump. And that, to me, is the most egregious part.
So the original SNL sketch, obviously they were doing this anniversary thing, so they were bringing back a bunch of sketches. And it's a reference to this original sketch that actually got a lot of praise at the time because it was one of the few Trump sketches that they did, or Trump supporter segments that they did, that actually had some good humor to it and was funny. And the whole point was basically that you have kind of a redneck guy on Black Jeopardy, and it turns out that he has more in common with the people who are on there with him than they would expect. They've done this a couple of times, and that to me is something that they were capable of doing at one point on SNL. They aren't capable of doing it anymore. And that's why this reads as so tone deaf. It reads as so out of touch, because the truth is that you had in this past election a broader coalition supporting Donald Trump, including a higher percentage of Black voters, a higher percentage of Hispanic voters, a higher percentage of young voters, particularly young men. You don't have the same type of demographics that you used to have, where you could just say, oh, well, this is just a bunch of hicks who are coming out for Donald Trump. But SNL doesn't know how to make a joke about that. So instead, they go back and lean on the crutch. And it's one of the reasons why, frankly, they've lost so much of their cultural power. All of this looking back over the past 50 years of SNL, one of the things that really sticks out is they used to be a powerful force that had cultural relevance, that had resonance, that could make people laugh on both sides of the political aisle, and do so pretty consistently for a very long time. And then basically during the 2015, 2016 period, their brains broke, and they haven't really been able to get back there since. And that's something that is frankly sad, because I love good comedy and I would like to see some occasionally on TV. You just won't find it at SNL.
And I don't even mind when they poke fun at Donald Trump, even though I don't like Alec Baldwin. When he portrays Donald Trump, sometimes I laugh because sometimes it's funny. I don't take myself or my party that seriously that I can't laugh.
Yeah, but come on. If you run this back and they had hired Shane Gillis and kept him originally, can you imagine how much better that would be for them right now? Every time that he did it, it would go viral. And instead, they lean on someone who, while he can be funny, 30 Rock, he was great, but like Alec Baldwin as Trump is just hateful and spiteful, and it never really worked. He hates the guy too much to do a good impression.
Yeah. Well, he also shot somebody, so there's that. I'm not so sure that he has the moral high ground in anything, but he got a TLC reality show out of it. So good for him.
Only two hosts, as John Mulaney pointed out yesterday, have actually committed murder. So that's something that SNL can say after 50 years. Great. Only two.
Yeah, I laugh when things are funny. I don't think a lot of what they do is funny anymore. I think the new cast is a little interesting, and I try to watch it sometimes.
Literally the only thing that's funny to me is when Michael Shea and Colin Jost swap jokes, because that's when they're actually pushing the envelope. But other than that, no.
Yeah, well, it's just lost its cultural relevancy. And I think so have award shows and all of it. I mean, if they want an award show to get some attention and an audience, they should ask Donald Trump to show up, because he shows up to everything else. Maybe we have Donald Trump at the Oscars this year. Who knows?
Well, I think maybe he would be if not for the fact that, the Oscars basically decided they're not interested in nominating popular movies anymore. Right. The fact is that the 2000 to 2010 period was the first time that you had fewer than 7 Best Picture winners that were that were in the top 10. Meaning, like, so we went from having, 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 9 out of 10 in terms of all these movies winning Best Picture that were also very popular, to a period where now we have, for the 2010s, it was 0. The only reason that trend broke was because of Oppenheimer. And this is the thing where, this time around, is anybody going to have watched whatever movie ends up winning? I just think it is absolutely hilarious, by the way, that the number one nominee in terms of the total nominations is Emilia Perez, which has blown up in such a crazy way because of the stupidity surrounding its trans star turning out to have done something completely unacceptable, which is criticize George Floyd in old tweets, which I have to say actually made me more interested in this is a dynamic where the whole story of this is like this horrible person redeeming themselves by cutting off their penis to become a woman in musical form, with all of this like cultural appropriation things going on. And yet that same thing doesn't work in real life Hollywood. They still get canceled over tweets. It's worse to have tweeted negative things about George Floyd than it is to have been a drug dealing, murdering cartel leader, in the movie. So it's like, I just think it is a wonderful indictment of like, this is why Hollywood sucks. We need to bring it back. We need to make Hollywood great again. We need to make great movies again in America. And maybe that's something that we can work on in the next couple of years too.
Yeah, make movies watchable again. Make them pro-America. We had Captain America who says that Captain America doesn't represent America. So, do that what you will. It's really disappointing. But I think that they've lost so much of their cultural relevance. And I think that's great. And let's just hope that this year all sports take the hint and they all become very pro-America. They don't have to be pro-Trump. Be pro-America. And unfortunately, as you well know, Ben, in today's day and age, if you are pro-America, you're probably also a conservative. So I guess we'll take that. It's a heavy crown to hold, but we will hold it. I always appreciate our conversations. Please come back soon. And, I know you have the in a little bit over at Bravo with Andy Cohen. I'm a big Bravo fan. I'm sure Andy Cohen does not like me, but spread the love, because I'm probably the top Bravo watcher of anybody on Fox News, and I would go toe to toe with anybody on my Bravo knowledge.
I would guess you are right about that, and Tomi, we'll see. Maybe next time you have the opportunity, he'll get you on Watch What Happens Live.
It would literally make my life, and I'm ashamed to say it, but I'm a nightly watcher. Thanks so much, Ben. I really appreciate your time, and please come back soon.
Of course.
All right, folks, the COVID era was the dumbest era in modern history. And while there's more to be done, President Trump is taking steps to right the wrongs. And it's time for final thoughts. It's hard to reckon with the fact that just a few years ago, we were forced to wear masks, forced to hole up in our homes like hermits, forced in some places to eat outside like animals if we didn't show a Vax card, forced to stand 6 feet apart like minions before boarding a plane and sitting right the hell next to each other. The dumb crap we actually complied with is mind-boggling to recall. So I know we'd all like to block out the COVID era because it was so stupid and pointless and awful, but because its impacts are still lurking and lingering, we can't just let it go. That's why I was so happy to see President Trump sign an executive order to pull federal funding from schools and education agencies that require COVID-19 vaccines.
Okay, that solves that problem.
Sir, will the Department of Education have to handle that?
Yes, it'll go through the Department of Education. Okay? Thanks.
Can I make one comment, Mr. President?
Yes, please.
As a father of 9, thank you. We should have parental freedom to decide what vaccines our kids take, as opposed to school systems and governors forcing upon the people that love these kids the most, which is the parents. So thank you for signing that.
Great, thank you very much. People wanted that very badly.
The nonprofit immunize.org says as of May 2024, there are no K-12 schools that still require the COVID vax, but there are 15 colleges and universities that still do. And while some may think this executive order is needless or pointless, it's not. And it's not because it sends a very strong message that President Trump will never allow this country to go down that stupid path again. Trump knows he may have made some mistakes in empowering the wrong people like Lord Fauci during COVID, and he's cleaning that up little by little, and this is part of that. We must never allow tyrants to do it to us again, not ever. COVID might be behind us, but we can never forget what they did to us, to students, to families, to businesses. So thank you, President Trump, for doing your part to give us the COVID reckoning we deserve. And those are my final thoughts. Please be sure to tune in tomorrow live at 1 p.m. Eastern, of course, on outkick.com, as well as foxnews.com. Also catch full episodes of this show on Fox Nation whenever you like. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless and take care. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want more of my hottest takes, must-see conversations, and of course, my final thoughts, click here and make sure you subscribe here so you never miss a beat. I'll be here every weekday, and I hope you'll join me.